you everybody for joining us. It's able to join us live, whether you're joining us today on this chilly February 17th at 1 o'clock 2021 or watching after the fact. We are very happy today at Stein Wealth Advisors to have Dr. Mary Berg with us. Dr. Berg has been a Rotarian since 2002, and she's a frequent speaker and trainer around the Rotary world, which is where I am fortunate enough to know her from. She is also a practicing clinical psychologist and has a vast knowledge of our behavior, our emotions, and dealing with those. And I asked Dr. Berg on for us today to talk with us about money and finance and all that. But first, I get a little bit funny about this, so I want to make sure that we do this justice. Dr. Berg, could you speak to your particular designation, explain some of the nuances? We might have some of our friends and clients that are counselors or in the industry, and I think it's a little confusing for all of us. Could you start out by, first of all, thank you for joining us, but explaining a little bit more about yourself that I missed in the intro, and tell us about yourself before we delve in.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'm a psychologist. Some people refer to psychologists based on their area of expertise. So you may have a school psychologist, a neuropsychologist, a clinical psychologist, that sort of thing. And I happen to be a clinical psychologist. And that means that my training is in various expertise of doing therapy with clients as well as assessment. So my day-to-day looks like doing individual therapy, family therapy, making diagnoses, and doing tests to help us to determine what diagnoses there are. Now, a psychologist, regardless of any of those types, school, neurologist, et cetera, or neuropsychologist rather, really is different than a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist is an MD who has specialized in psychotropic medication studies, and they are the ones who prescribe your medications. A psychologist typically does not prescribe. In Pennsylvania, we do not have the laws based for us to allow us to prescribe. And some states are lobbying for that. And I'm not sure if some states have actually achieved that or not, but in Pennsylvania, psychologists do not prescribe medications, whereas psychiatrists do. But psychiatrists typically aren't trained in doing psychotherapy or assessment. So there's those major differences. Thanks for asking, because it's a really common question. Joe, I think you're frozen. I can't hear anything.
I unmuted so we could hear you. So there we go.
Okay.
All right, sorry. So what I was saying is I do find this area very interesting. Over my career, I've seen quite a bit of crossover of the psychology industry and the finance industry. And I think it's important, and a lot of my peers have gone into that. Now, I think that when we work with our internal narratives around money and finance, it can get interesting, right? So one of my favorite things that I get to see is when somebody gets it, right? When we click with explaining a complex thing with finance, and that's a fun emotion that we get to experience as advisors with finance, but they're not always so fun, the emotions that we're dealing with in regards to money. So when we deal with these reactions, what causes us to think and behave in these ways, and how do we find these ways, like how do we react to these stimuli? Could you maybe start off with that, and that'll kind of get us rolling? I know that's a big question, but.
So yes, essentially what causes someone to think or behave in a particular manner when it comes to money, and there actually are a number of psychological factors that influence our spending of money, our saving of money, and overall our development of financial instincts, such as our personal habits, our experiences, family history. All of those things help to create our, what I would call, financial personalities, or how we think and feel about money. And interestingly, our financial personality is actually not set in stone, but rather changes with time, with age, with experience, and with circumstances.
So there is more behind this, and it is like any other emotional reaction or behavior. I think in the industry they refer to as money scripts commonly, and maybe we'll talk about that a little later. But So there is a lot behind this, and kind of what forms that, and how do we get into this subject more?
Sure, sure, absolutely. Even behind our decision-making process, whether or not to spend or save money is a psychological process. So let me tell you a little bit about how, let's just say, spending money works. So when we're making decisions, your brain has two systems for helping us to make a decision. One is what I would call the slow system, and one is a fast system. So we have our slow brain, so to speak, and our fast brain. And the slow system involves conscious, deliberate, rational thought, and it requires a significant amount of energy. Whereas the fast system is more intuitive, sensitive to emotion, and it runs on, of course, much less energy, and it can actually make decisions for you in a millisecond. Now, for a large financial decision, like maybe refinancing a home, purchasing a home, those sorts of things, we really do tend to rely on our slow brain. Whereas routine decisions, how much to spend on a pair of shoes, go grocery shopping, that sort of thing, very fast brain decision-making process. But herein lies the potential problem. So you see, your fast brain system makes rapid fire associations, comparing what you're doing now with what you've also done in the past. So for instance, if you overspend at the grocery store today, your brain will send fewer warning signals to yourself, to your impulse in the future if you do it again. So the next time you shop, having overspent today, the next time you shop, your brain will send you fewer warning signals and even less signals the time after that. So what does that mean? Over time, you continue to overspend each time you do it. So it's a natural reinforcement process. Now, the good news is that you can actually make small changes, incrementally so, where your fast brain will begin to adjust its comparisons and integrate some of the aspects of more slow brain thinking. Things like taking only predetermined amount of money or cash with you versus taking just your credit card. Using a phone app that might track your spending, or making short-term financial goals. All of these are examples of how we can sort of reset that fast brain thinking to actually become more conscious and deliberate, more slow brain-liked, so that we are less likely to overspend. There are some other booby traps out there besides our own brain too that can cause us to overspend. And I would say, Joe, that the number one is distraction. If you are trying to stick to a budget, I always tell my patients then each time that they shop, they need to exercise self-control. Sounds like, okay, no problem. But self-control requires determination. It requires focus. It requires effort, all of which can really waver when we are distracted. And studies have shown that even a simple behavior like texting or scrolling through social media while you're shopping can lead to significant overbuying and impulse purchases, which we're all guilty of. And this is true for not just small, scrolling purchases or in the grocery store, but even large purchases.
That's a good point. I tell you what, and not to go too far off, but I tell you, that sounds to me like that negative reinforcement and the lowering of the pain of a bad financial decision can kind of get somebody used to it. And I feel like we see that where somebody makes maybe not a super detrimental financial decision, but it's not in their best interest. It's not the best decision. And then it becomes less and less painful over time. And then becomes a normal decision. So
Exactly.
So, and to not go too deep into this, but there are some areas of study that are starting to get into this where we are taking clinical psychologists and doing deep studies on the brain and how it interfaces with money. If you're into this, this is way deep, but my favorite authors are Dr. Bradley Klontz and Dr. Nuffinger, who writes The Psychology of Investing, the textbook on this stuff. But if you don't want to go and do a dissertation on, behavioral finance and all this other stuff, like what can we do now? Because I appreciate there's a lot out there, and this is a very new area of study, but what do you think? I mean, what can we do that's a little more tangible right now in lieu of doing all of the
Deep
research,
dives,
deep
right.
dives and all that?
Right. And you're right. I think the art or science behind behavioral finance and spending, but mainly finance, is becoming a really a new niche out there. And I'm sure there are even psychologists who are going to be specializing in this area and probably already are. But you're right, we need immediate help. People want to know today, while they're watching this, maybe, what can I do right now to avoid overspending? Psychologically, how can I begin to make those little nuance changes? So the first thing I would recommend if someone were working on this would be to simply wait 24 hours before purchasing anything over a certain amount. And I usually set that at about $75 to $100. Or before I buy anything that is not a necessity online. Now, I say not a necessity because of COVID. Right now, many people are shopping online, even for their groceries. Today I'll be shopping at Aldi's online for the delivery to come to my doorstep. So I'm not going to wait 24 hours for that. But for non-essential purchases, you're just, thinking about this thing that a new light for your office, or a pair of shoes. I keep going back to that. I would wait.
What is that Freudian? Is that a Freudian slip? I don't know.
Maybe I just like shoes.
And that's okay. And that's okay.
So before I do that, I'll put them in the cart, and then I will literally wait 24 hours before I click purchase, because oftentimes tomorrow I will say no to that purchase. I'll say, I really don't need it. So sometimes there's an emotional reason that we're shopping and we really aren't aware of it. So the simple rule of waiting 24 hours before a non-necessity purchase is made, or anything over, say, 75 to 100, you set your own limit, start there. And by doing this, again, you get past whatever emotional content might be subconsciously fueling that purchase. And you get past that initial rush or excitement or just the desire that is there. Sometimes we just want something, I'm like, oh, that looks so neat, I just want it. And 24 hours can be a godsend in reducing all of those, what we would call id responses, id impulses in us. And again, this will allow your slow brain system to do a cost value analysis of the situation, and to help you make a better determination of really the need for the item, or even the appropriateness of the purchase currently. It may help you to be able to check your balance, check your finances. You may even find that doing this allows for your slow brain to take the time to comparison shop for better pricing. There's been plenty of times where I thought I wanted something, put it in the cart, and then tomorrow came back to it and said, let me check a couple more websites. And sure enough, I find it at a lower price. So this is one real effective way to retrain the brain to use the slow system more frequently.
I love that. Retrain the brain. And
Retrain the brain.
I don't know, and tell me if I'm way off here, but it seems like this stimulus management is part of a lot of ways that our emotions show themselves outside of our body, whether you're dealing with your emotions in one way or another. And let's be honest, I mean, the way that we buy things has changed, right? The way that places market to us has changed dramatically. So there is a lot more of this instant gratification loophole built into our everyday lives. So am I singing the
You are. I mean, the impulse gratification, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a bit, but let's touch on that, what you just said, how things are being marketed to us in my opinion, in a completely unethical way. So for instance, when the stimulus checks all hit and everyone got them within a certain week, what showed up at the $589 mark at Walmart? Big screen TVs.
TVs?
They were, all of a sudden, your television was inundated. Your Facebook feeds, all of your feeds were inundated with items marked at the just below $600 mark. Do you notice any of that advertising now? No. Think about it. We are being tricked all the time to psychologically buy into something that we don't need. And now with something like a stimulus check, you all of a sudden have that money in your hand and you think, well, it's on sale. I better get it now while supplies, oh, that term, while supplies last, will suck someone in emotionally. Um, uh, FOMO, fear of missing out, FOMO, for those of you who don't know. It's a real psychological problem. So advertising agencies know how to really hook people on and reel them in. And these are purchases that most of us truly don't need a 95-inch television set at just under $600. But sure enough, they sold out, didn't they?
Yeah. Well, and I think that this could be a light at the end of the tunnel, right? Because when you speak of retraining your brain, there is a light on the other side of this, and that we can retrain our brain for positive reinforcement for good action, similar to working out or achieving something that we wanted to achieve or laying our goals out. So maybe we use this to turn. So what is that difference between like this short term, short goal gratification? Hey, we all got to feed ourselves, right? You're going to need to go to the grocery store unless you're Jeremiah Johnson for some.
Right.
So we have to buy stuff in our life, and we're going to have to learn to deal with these existential marketing threats, or however you want to look at it. But we have stuff we got to get done, right? We got stuff we got to do. So we have these short versus long-term decisions. And where do we find that kind of balance? Because there's got to be a gray area if there's, two sides of this coin. So maybe share with us on that.
Sure, absolutely. So again, going back to thinking about instant gratification when we really just want something, another technique that we can use is called anchoring. And what that does is it anchors your spending to something that you really love. So literally think of an anchor. Everybody who's watching right now or watching later, think of something that you really, really enjoy. It might just be coffee. I'm not sure what it might be. It might be, maybe we'll do home improvement. So let me back up a bit here and tell you about the psychology of anchoring and how it works to both bias us positively as well as negatively. And again, let me use home improvement, because I know there are people out there who just love home improvement stuff. So let's pretend, Joe, that your favorite home improvement store is having a sale on, I don't know, chainsaws. Oh, you like chainsaws. Okay, great. All right, in that scenario, it would be a typical practice for the home improvement store to show the original price next to the sale price. So the original price becomes the anchor, which makes the sale price feel like a comparatively good deal. So now the item that you wanted to purchase, this chainsaw, you begin to judge it in relation to the discount between the two prices rather than the actual cost, or rather than the value of the chainsaw itself. So again, you begin to judge it in relation to just to the discount. Everything else is thrown out. Do I need it right now? Was it a good buy to begin with? Is it a brand that's reputable? Now it's just like, wow, it's $75 less. So that judgment has shifted for you. And it's not just price tags that create bias either. Stores will use a variety of visual aids as anchors to increase their potential sales. And I recently read an example of this in a study that was related to soup. And I'm not sure of the brand, but we'll just say Campbell's.
We love soup at SW.
Everyone loves Campbell's tomato soup, right? It's my favorite. So we'll just say it was Campbell's. So the store put up a display of soup cans in one end of the store, and it read 89 cents per can with a limit of 12 cans per customer. All right, there's your anchor. All right. On the other side of the store, there was a display of the same cans with the same price at 89 cents per can, but the terms 12 can limit per customer was eliminated. Guess what happened? Shoppers who bought from the display with no limit purchased an average of just 3.3 cans. All right. But the buyers who bought from the display of cans where they said they could only buy 12 per person bought an average of 7 cans. Yeah, more than double. This is a classic example of how the brain unconsciously anchors. And in this case, it anchored with the number 12 and with feeling pressured because I'm limited, and the word limited, and it adjusted, resulting in shoppers overbuying and obviously overspending their money. Who needs 12 cans of tomato soup at any one given time? Most people do not. So that's one way that stores can use anchoring in a negative way, just like the comparison as well, to tweak our biases. Now, let me get back here to the notion, my original notion of anchoring about spending to something that you love. If you allow yourself, say, to dine out for lunch at your favorite lunch place just once per week, and let's say on average you spend $10 each time, then over 1 month, you're spending 40 bucks. If you anchor that purchase, eating out one time per week, when you're shopping, say, for a $40 pair of shoes that you really love, I think these shoes are really cool, your brain can then rationalize whether or not the shoes are worth 4 lunches, because I've anchored $40 at 4 lunches. So is my $40 pair of shoes worth 4 lunches? And this type of anchoring technique can help, again, to engage your slow system, your slow brain, and to decrease your chances of impulse buying.
I love it.
So those are some really quick tips, I think, that anyone can use, and also just to be aware of what's happening to you with advertising companies, to think through your purchases in a slightly different way.
That's wonderful. I want to call it the love anchor, because it's something that you love that helps you quantify. I'm going to call it we got to use your love anchor. I'm loving it. Okay. Okay. So let me go with this. So I think we kind of touched on it, but is there anything more we wanted to go into with this long versus short-term decision making? Because these long-term decisions can be very difficult for people, especially when, let's say they're very young like yourself, they're a Gen Xer, retirement seems so far away, and these are long-term decisions, but you're trying to build up these positive reinforcements of savings or reinvestment or consistently reviewing your finances, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe go into like, how do we I don't want to call it trick ourselves, how do we train ourselves into building in these better habits?
Sure. So you're asking me more about like our emotional connection to money in the short term versus the long term, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so sure. Let me pose a question to you then, Joe. If I offered you, say, $50 today, or if you wait until tomorrow, I'll give you 100. Which will you take?
100.
You're going to wait till tomorrow, right? Exactly.
I passed my boards. Yeah. I was wanted to see if the board questions actually.
And most people would choose to wait until tomorrow because it's not that far away. It's just short enough time that you can defer your gratification. But the longer that gratification is put off, the less likely that people are willing to defer it. So let's revisit the offer. All right. So again, I'm going to offer you $50 today, Joe, or I'm going to offer you $100 a year from now. Chances are they're going to be a lot higher that you're going to go for the instant gratification, taking the smaller amount right now versus waiting a whole year. Because first of all, the further away the money, the less important the dollar difference really becomes, because we weigh out of that, a lot can happen in a year. We may not be knowing each other in a year or connected in a year, or you may have moved or have forgotten about the offer. The risk of not getting the payoff begins to outweigh the chance of getting the money, or the risk of nothing outweighs the chance of getting more money.
Wonderful.
So the tendency to value smaller but more immediate rewards over a larger long-term reward is what I would say psychologists call present bias. It's a pretty simple term, but present bias. And this bias really speaks to why planning retirement, for instance, can be so hard for people.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of this in that Nofsinger book about the psychology of investing if you really want to do a deep dive. We got a question from one of our good friends, John, on a somewhat more macro level. Can we talk about the psychology, of preparing for the future and for thinking about your total assets and resources? John, that's a great question. Thank you for throwing that in there. Mary, do you want to touch that first and then I'll follow up? Or
Sure. And I think I do have some things I want to say about
do we want to jump into
preparing.
John's question? Do we want to bump John's question because you were planning on covering something?
I'm going to be covering a little bit. I think you and I both want to cover a little bit about how to prepare, but again, I want to just circle back to John. Again, preparing is harder because it's a longer set away. And again, the tendency to value more immediate, quick, smaller amounts is easy, but it just becomes psychologically harder because our future is so unknown. And so a lot of emotional content goes into making the decision whether to sit down and do it or not. A lot of people feel like they just struggle with the immediacy of doing that, of being able to sit down and plan immediately, taking the time, the emotional energy it takes to put all the papers in front of you, to gather it all up. All of those sorts of things come into play. So we tend to put off our longer term planning because it has a lot of emotional energy that it takes. But we could probably circle back to that throughout the rest of our conversation.
And I think one thing that both Mary, you and I are very passionate about in our personal lives is our charitable work and our civic engagement. And I think that maybe what John might be getting at is, yes, there are these like layers of importance, right? I need to feed myself today. I need to retire tomorrow. And I want a good legacy down the road. And I think sometimes for a lot of folks, it may be, there are these different varieties of quantification around like, what are we talking about right now, right? Are we talking about immediate needs, retirement needs, estate needs? And as the time frame gets further out, the scope and what you need to think about, and I think what is my legacy and what do I want to be remembered for and how should I do this? And if I give people these resources, are they ready for them? Or am I giving them the right way? So I think it's interesting as we think about these long-term goals, how do we bring them to reality and not get so caught up in that? Because it can get complex, especially when we get into these very complicated charitable giving strategies or multi-level generational trusts or things that are more complicated in nature. So,
and let's also touch on the fact that planning for our future forces us to think of our demise. And that is,
it, didn't you? You had to go and say it.
That's scary for most people. I mean, heck, I think it's scary for 9 out of 10 people. Nobody wants to think about dying. And here we are planning for maybe, not just getting old, even retirement, having to realistically think about our goals and how to save. All that's really hard. So it opens up a whole can of worms, potentially at least, for the need to consider some very hard topics.
Is that like self-actualization and self-reflection and that kind of stuff? Is that something that somebody would speak to somebody like you about? Or
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just think too, people will come to me just to talk about their long-term goals in life and how they want to plan things out and do things right, to leave a legacy, to leave your footprint emotionally, mentally, psychologically, with family, with money, whatever it is, however you leave your mark. I can remember my father wanting to make sure that his children were set up financially, that we wouldn't have to, we would understand finances and we wouldn't have to struggle with understanding finances. He was always a big investor. So when my parents passed, some of those stocks came over to us, and I wasn't just fumbling with them. I understood, because he cultivated a culture of understanding investing. So maybe that was less scary for me to think about, what do I do next? But for someone who's never dealt with that level of planning, it can be ominous.
A good point. That's a good point. Okay. Well, let me, John, I think we got to your question a little bit. I think we have some more to it, but if we have extra, if you need some more, let us know in the chat box, or if anybody else has some questions. I love where this is going. And just as a time check, we're about halfway through our hour with Dr. Berg. So make sure you get your questions in as you will. But let me transition here. So Mary, I wanted to talk a little bit about how does this emotional, psychological health, how does it connect? Because there are some physical manifestations that this takes, because a lower than what we may have thought pocketbook, or a financial plan that isn't quite finished, like there are real world consequences to that. So inaction is an action, and there are some physical manifestations that we see. We talked about overspending and misusing of finances, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about the interconnectedness of this. Is that fair?
It's a great question. Emotional and physical, our emotional and psychological health are definitely related to our financial health, and vice versa. Okay. So think of psychological and emotional health as a continuum. On the one end of the spectrum, you have mental health. We're healthy. On the other end, mental illness. And all of us fall on to that spectrum somewhere. And where you fall changes slightly from day to day, depending on a number of factors, such as like your general health, your sleep quality, your nutrition, exercise, stress levels, typical satisfaction of your day-to-day life, and really your mood in general. So if mental health stays, say, in a negative state for a longer period of time, or it's even in a steady decline, you're increased for risk of financial problems. So if your mental health is on the decline or negatively down here for a long period of time, your risk for financial problems is on the incline. In studies, we found that people with depression and anxiety are often more likely to be in debt. And studies have even shown that even slight declines in mental health can be associated with increased financial stress. And as I said, vice versa. Financial stresses can cause mental health issues. So even small financial stresses can temporarily cause us to have a decrease in our emotional wellness. So if you'd like, I could go into a little bit of some of the mental health disorders that I would say most commonly see in my office or across the board in mental health field that are impacted, with financial well-being, in the connection. Okay.
What are the most common, like, physical manifestations that you see people struggling with? And just be very clear, right? These people can be on any scope of the financial spectrum from a means standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Some people have quite a bit of they come from means, and these financial things happen to them just the same as somebody that is in a more impoverished state. So it's wherever you're at on that scope of, like you said, a mental health spectrum, that has no relevance on the amount of resources that you have at your disposal.
Correct.
Carry on. Sorry, I just thought that point was worth making.
It is. So I would say there are a handful of common diagnoses that I might treat when I'm seeing a lot of financial unwell-being. The first most obvious to me would be something related to an impulse control disorder. And that category would apply to the presentation of symptoms and behaviors of impulses that are severe enough that cause distress in someone's life. This could be a kleptomania disorder, a shopping disorder, any kind of inability to control one's impulses. And of course, if you can't control your impulses, you may have more and more financial stressors or consequences. Secondarily, persons who are affected by bipolar disorders often find themselves making really impulsive purchases or going on shopping sprees, especially during manic phases. And this can wreak havoc on one's financial balance and stability, because oftentimes these purchases are large. As I mentioned before, anxiety and depressive cycles too can cause people to spend money, often in an effort to sort of fill a vacant emotional void. Perhaps shopping or buying temporarily and superficially causes someone to feel happy, or it relieves an anxious state. Hence the term retail therapy. You've all heard that before. It's a real thing. It changes the way they feel temporarily. It's a Band-Aid. And of course, obsessive compulsive issues can run in both directions when it comes to spending. Being, for instance, obsessed with spending or having things and thus being compelled to buy. People with these issues use shopping as their primary tool for coping with stress. And the key characteristic of compulsive buying is that the spending will make the person feel like it's irresistible. The spending becomes irresistible. So the person continues and keeps on spending despite tons of negative consequences typically, and despite the lack of the joy that they're actually getting from this spending in the long run. So in those cases, spending really does become like an addiction. And like addiction, when that is happening, the reward centers in the brain are activated when spending. They release dopamine into the system, and dopamine triggers feelings of temporary pleasure, and it leaves the spender to keep spending in order to keep that high, or reach that high cycle, perpetually moving. Now, on the opposite end, Joe, I've actually seen people with great fear of spending. So an obsessive compulsive need to not spend, to hang on to every single penny that they have, obsessively depriving themselves or their family of any even justified purchases. So I would say those are the bulk addictions as well. Of course, can wreak havoc on spending. Any type of addiction, gambling, sex addictions, drug addictions, alcohol addictions, all of that. Of course, it's pretty obvious how that would impact someone's finances. But regardless, when financial problems are a part of a larger mental health problem, the mental health problem has got to be treated. And with that, then financial health can be restored if it's addressed as part of the treatment.
Thank you. And I couldn't agree with you more with your assessments. And I think that, and unfortunately, Josh and Melissa couldn't join today. But I think for the three of us that have been in practice 15 years, we've seen a lot of these manifestations, and manifestations can come in a lot of ways, right? Maybe somebody is using a substance, or in an abusive relationship, or dealing with their emotions in a not so healthy way. But it can be both ways. I'm sure that we've all seen folks in various circumstances, but you're right. There are folks that unfortunately will deprive themselves of the millionaire next door retirement. They scrimped and saved their whole lives, but of fear, deep-seated fears that may not be their fault, are preventing them from enjoying this thing that they earned and worked their butt off for. And so it is important to have these conversations, because it's not always what you think it is. It's a lot of, I would say, people getting themselves into good habits, but those good habits becoming obsessive and turning detrimental. And they're missing out. But hey, we all live our lives, and I think that's why professionals on either side of the scope are here. But I appreciate all those comments, and we'll be giving some PSAs at the end. But I want to be cognizant. We only got 20 minutes left, and I have some really important stuff I want to get to. We've been talking about our personal relationships with money, but this is often a team sport. I know your lovely husband is on watching us, but it's got to affect relationships, as we know. And you hear the statistics, the number one reason for divorce is finance and all these things. Can you quantify that a little bit, and how you see money playing a role on your couch? I hate to use that as an analogy, but out on your couch and all that.
Absolutely. It absolutely impacts all types of relationships. And you're right. It is one of the most common issues that causes disruptions or conflicts in marriages And there are really several reasons. So first, when we come into a relationship, we all bring with us baggage, including financial baggage. And for some of us, that baggage might be more obvious, like, say, debt, or maybe having an extended family member who relies on you for financial assistance. But we all have debt, or I'm sorry, we all have baggage. Some of it might be less obvious, like the way we think about money or our relationship with money. In other words, what I would again call our financial personalities. How we feel about money and how we behave about money or with money is part of our financial personality. And our financial personality really sets the tone for how we feel about it, how we react to money, and how we behave around money issues. If you are maybe a what's yours is mine kind of personality, we get married and so we have joint accounts. That's one type of personality. There's the other side of that coin. Mine is mine and yours is yours. Separate accounts. We split the bills down the middle. You spend on what you want. I spend on what I want. That's a whole different type of personality. And then there are, of course, all kinds in between. But there are various types of money personalities that you bring into your marriage. And couples really should have pointed conversations about these topics long before they decide to tie the knot. So that's the first cause that I see in couples arguing because they had no idea what their spouses or their significant others' financial personality was all about, or what obvious issues they brought, what was in their baggage, what was in that suitcase that they were dragging into the relationship when they came in. Couples can also get into a lot of trouble if they have issues such as habits like hiding their spending or hiding debt. That happens a lot more than you'd ever expect. So anytime there's a dishonesty or secrecy when it comes to money, that's a huge red flag that could be a factor in causing separation and divorce.
And to stop real quick, there is an appropriate way to do this. So oftentimes with second marriages or marriages at a more mature age, there are resources involved and previous relationships, and there are ways to have these conversations. I want to hear from Dr. Berger, like hashtag talk to your advisors. We're here for you to help facilitate these, or if you have a friend that has a question on something like this. So carry on, Mary. Sorry.
That's really great advice. Not only do you maybe want to talk to a therapist prior to tying the knot if you have issues that are obviously different, but even better, talking to a financial advisor about how to handle money moving into a relationship is a wonderful idea. It certainly can't help, and it's a proactive approach that very few people take, unfortunately. So okay, so another hot issue for couples that I see a lot is a change or difference in power, because with money comes power. So power issues usually occur when one person, for instance, has a paying job and the other doesn't, like maybe a stay-at-home parent or someone who is temporarily unemployed or going to school. Or when someone earns considerably more than the other person. So both are working, but you make more than I do and we're married. That could be a power play. Another power play might be when one partner comes from a wealthier family than, say, the other does. And when we have these scenarios occur, we often see that the breadwinner, the one who makes more money, typically wants more control over the money, or just in making money decisions. And this can really ultimately disrupt the marital balance and create a power inequity in couples. So that's a huge problem. These possible scenarios are huge problems when we think about power and finances and money and power.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, I mean, the most successful couples I've had the opportunity to work with, they have very healthy relationships regards to their money, and these can be second marriages, third marriages in a lot of cases, lots of assets involved or not that much assets involved, but a good conversation, in my opinion, leads to much better outcomes in the long term. And that candidness, just here's where we're at, and here's, and I have a couple of pointers myself, but I'll let you finish. Carry on. I love these.
Yeah, you're right about that. I typically don't tell, I typically tell patients to be mindful and be present in their lives as often as possible. But in this case, discussing the what ifs in your life. What if I want to retire early? I decide to change careers, or what if I want to go back to school, or what if one of us loses our job? How will that feel, and how will we deal with that financially? I think talking about those what ifs early on and communicating, as you said, is really important in heading off these type of power play problems.
Yeah. Well,
Something that couples usually talk about too is whether or not they want to have children. But very rarely do they talk about the financial impact and the possible problems that could cause. Or maybe they haven't talked about having children and they, get pregnant. Here never happens, right? No.
Always planned. Yeah.
Children are a huge cause of financial problems in marriages. I read a study, again, I love my studies, that it was a 2020 study. The suggested average cost to raise one child to the age of 18 is now $250,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's pretty much that's till 18. So we're not talking college, folks, here. We're just talking just to get them through clothing, shelter, regular school, that kind of stuff, So it's a huge financial burden to take on to decide to raise a child. So the financial pressures of parenting alone, without the financial cost of parenting, can certainly cause conflict. But you know what, Joe? When I think about all of these problems, all of these inherent potential problems, the one thing that can solve most of them, or at least begin to address them, is communication.
That's wonderful. I love that transition. Let me use that place to talk about a couple of points I put together based on what we were going to, talk about, that I think can help with that communication, because oftentimes people don't know how or what to be communicating with each other, that what should we be looking at. Right now, the folks that work with us, we have annual meetings or quarterly meetings with them and review the finances, but every couple or group that we work with, one person is normally the person that's leading the charge with the finances, right? And we want to bring everybody into that conversation, and a rising tide raises all ships. So my first point that I'd like to make with this is everybody is coming into a relationship or into a situation with a different financial literacy level, and they're coming at it from a different place. Nobody comes from the same background, and nobody is educated the exact same way. So understanding that we may have gaps between what we understand or maybe think we understand in relation to finance, that is an important thing to acknowledge on the table, because we oftentimes, they're our spouse, they're our peer, we trust them with everything in our life, so I just assume they know everything I know. And in regards to maybe our friends, they know that, but we need to make sure we're all on the same page from a technical standpoint. And guess what? That's why your CFPs are here, or your CPAs, or your other folks in whatever capacity. The second thing I would mention is doing regular check-ins. So you don't need us to do your family check-in. And the three things I always like to see, the family budget, the family balance sheet, and the family spending report. And Mary, we do a lot of nonprofit work, so we're involved with different boards and this and that. And that's really what you get with a treasurer's report, right? What are all of our assets and liabilities, and what do we have? What are we planning on spending, and what have we actually spent in the past month, 2 months, 3 months? And that kind of gets everything out on the table, and that's a way to touch base with the people involved, normally the parents of the family. And as kids get older, this is a great exercise to do with kids, to teach them, here is how your folks take care of this little business that we call our household. So I like that. And then lastly is setting smart goals, right? So I think, Mary, when you were talking about setting goals that are reasonable for ourselves, part of our job as advisors is to help set reasonable goals and keep you up to date with what's going on with them. So if our assumptions have to change because inflation's higher, or the market isn't returning what we thought in that sector, or whatever, my tax code changes, we're adjusting your plan. I think that people oftentimes aren't doing that emotional check-in where like, am I going to be okay retiring early? Am I emotionally ready to stop working 10 years earlier than my peers? Am I emotionally ready to give that gift to charity? Am I emotionally ready for my kids to start taking over some of these resources that we've accumulated? And all of those are valid questions. But like you said, they start with communication and having a candid, insightful, sometimes tough conversation with ourselves, right? It's easy to hit trade. Sometimes it's a lot tougher to say, here's how I feel about this. And I think that's, good for all of us. There's a spectrum. So anyway, that was really, I wanted to get that out. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Mary, on those like kind of quick, those are more technical things. I know that's more the technical, not the emotional stuff, but I think that from what you said, it is important to have that. Here's our baseline stuff.
Yeah.
And this is what's out there. So,
and I think from your standpoint, if you know a little bit about a person's financial history, and I don't mean technically, but emotionally, what are they coming from when it comes to money? What was their upbringing like? How did their parents save? Maybe what are their memories associated with money?
I have a trick for you.
Okay.
So for you and your clients and anybody watching here or at home, a nice way to start this conversation is talking about your first money memory. And Dr. Klontz, in his studies, call it their money scripts. And I think it's a nice kind of icebreaker. So I'll share mine. And Mary, would you be willing to share yours?
I just
We
got it.
about
Yeah.
9 minutes left, so I'll be real
Okay.
quick and then we'll wrap it up. But so my earliest money memory, and I'm planning on doing a video with this, so hopefully we can get that out. But my grandparents had gifted me a couple of shares of Ford, GM, and a couple other small blue chip common stocks. And my father would make me every Sunday as we're watching football, I have to go in and write the price of it, the dividend and whatnot. And that was a very nominal kind of thing to do. Like it was cute. And I mean, did it really effectuate anything? No, but I'm now in the profession. It led to me knowing about finance and being engaged with it my whole life. And it was a fun little cute thing to do. By the way, if you want to do this for your kid, we'll bring a video out on this. You can buy just shares of stock and print them out and they can do this, but we're going to do a full thing on this later on. But that was my first memory of money. And it was so impactful because my grandparents gave me something that I was to take care of. And I was to keep track of it, even if I didn't know what that meant or what a dividend was, which many people still know what a dividend is. If you want to know, call your CFP. But that's the interesting thing. So that's my first money story. And I still love talking to my dad about those shares. I still got them. So
Oh, I love it. No
what's
wonder,
yours? What's
like,
your first?
that makes sense. Like, look where you are now. Isn't that like gives you goosies, right?
It starts the whole chain, right?
Okay,
And
mine isn't quite as responsible. So my father, of course, was the money man in our household too. So, and he would always talk to me about money. In fact, he always had the Wall Street Journal. And he always had the stock market exchange on the television set on mute. That's when we had mute buttons back then. And so I can remember the ticker tape going across the bottom. And I would go into where he would sit and watch TV, and I'd typically ask him for money. It didn't matter how old I was. Dad, can I have $1? Dad, can I have some money? And I can remember being really young. And I don't know if it's my first memory, but it was the first thing that came to mind when you asked. And he'd say, okay, if you can find my wallet. And so I would go through his closet, and he always wore suits to work because he was a lawyer. And so I'd go through his inner pockets of his suits because that's where men kept their wallets. And I'd check and it wouldn't be there. And he knew I was doing this. And then he would have his chest of drawers, and I'd look through there. And then he had this, I guess it was like a jewelry box of sorts, a men's jewelry box where he kept his cufflinks and his watches and things. And sure enough, it'd be in one of those drawers. And I would pull it out, and I can remember how it felt. It was woven. And I can remember how it smelled like leather. I can remember how the money smelled, and I would rush over to him and give it to him. And he would open it up really like kind of, funny like that, and pull one out like it was like he was struggling to get it out. And then he'd be like, here you go. And he'd hand me $1. So he'd make me work for it, but not like you.
Yeah,
And
but that's
we
wonderful.
had a wonderful relationship with money together.
Thank you for sharing that, Mary, and I really appreciate these. So to reiterate, let's make sure we hit all our points because I think we hit a lot of really cool stuff. So my takeaways from you are use a love anchor, right? If it costs 3 chainsaws, maybe I don't need to be buying it, right? I'm going to put that one off and I'll use a 24-hour rule for ancillary spending and starting to monitor like some of the techniques that people are using to get me to check into buying their product, even if I need it or not. And lastly, from you, have good communications, right? This all starts with communication, whether it be with my therapist, my CFP, my spouse, my whomever is in my world of finance. Having better conversations lead to better outcomes, I think. So that's what I took from you today, Dr. Berg. Anything additional you want to add on that? Or
I just want to go back to John really quick, the fellow who asked the question. And I would say my number one tip for having a psychological preparedness for talking about the future is doing that with someone that you trust. I've had a lot of conversations, probably the most with my father, whom I trusted. And he led me in so many good directions. But once I found a good financial advisor, thanks, Joe, having someone you trust to share all of your fears or all of your concerns or all of your hopes and dreams with really is the best advice I could give to starting that conversation, to psychologically begin to think about your total assets, your resources, and your future, and to keep that conversation flowing.
Well, and before we'll stop with the last couple minutes for questions from our folks that have stayed with us for an hour, but Dr. Berg, maybe some people that are watching this now or later might know somebody that may need to talk to somebody, or whether it's to, and obviously they know how to get a hold of us at steinwealth.com for their financial stuff, but if somebody needs or thinks they know somebody that needs to speak to a mental health professional, how would they reach out to folks? What's the appropriate way to start those conversations, whether for themselves or somebody else?
Great question. And yeah, any of those mental health issues that I noted, or even minor mental health issues or struggles, it's always great to have a therapist that you can share your thoughts and feelings with, and they can help guide you. No matter where you are today watching this, psychologists are now available by telemedicine. It's great. It's one of the benefits that we've had through the pandemic. The best way to find a psychologist in your area, and I'm going to put this into the chat box, is through psychologytoday.com. You go to that website and you click the little button in the upper middle section that says find a therapist. You'll just punch in your zip code and immediately all of the therapists that are in that area will populate there. They have little bios, photos, videos, etc. So you can really kind of get an idea of who you might connect with. That is the best way to find a therapist and get your needs met as quickly as possible.
Thank you. All right. Well, I think we covered a ton today. If there are any additional live questions, you can submit them here for the next couple minutes. If you have additional questions, you can always reach out to us afterward. Find us on steinwealth.com. Like, follow, share us. We are trying to bring out more content. If you have an idea for some content, we would love to bring on a different professional, have a different conversation, or get you guys what you want, because we're here for you, our clients. So I very much thank Dr. Berg. She is a great friend of mine, and I very much appreciate her time. She is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful advocate for her profession, and as a Rotarian and all things in between. So Dr. Berg, thank you. I don't see any additional questions. We are at the hour, and I do want to respect your time. I know you have many, many people to help in many capacities. So ma'am, thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. It was my pleasure, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one, and thanks everybody for joining.